Mingalaba, hello everyone, and welcome back to MMTV's weekly news roundup. I'm Quentin Covington, bringing you an in-depth look at Myanmar's recent events. From growing concerns over Daw Aung San Suu Kyi's imprisonment to the plight of migrant workers and the revolutionary technological efforts against military oppression, this week's stories reflect both the struggles and resilience of Myanmar's people. Let's delve into the most significant developments of this week. First, nearly 2 years without access to Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, growing concerns over her health and legal cases. National Unity Government resolves crisis for 50 stranded migrant workers in Thailand. Union Minister U Aung Myo Min addresses Myanmar communities in Indiana. U.S. and Indonesian presidents unite in condemning junta's violence against civilians in Myanmar. NUG introduces a revolutionary VPN to circumvent junta's internet censorship. Passport extensions for Myanmar citizens in South Korea by the NUG office. Freedom of the press under siege. 215 journalists arrested and 11 killed during military rule. And lastly, southern Myanmar clashes in October. 94 junta soldiers killed, 17 surrender. Now, let's take a deeper look at each of these headlines. Nearly 2 years without access to Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, growing concerns over her health and legal cases. Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, detained since Myanmar's military coup in February of 2021, has not been allowed any contact with her family or legal team for nearly 2 years. Her last meeting with her lawyers occurred in December of 2022, and repeated requests for access have been ignored by the junta. Her legal team has submitted 12 formal requests, including one tied to her family home case in Yangon, but the junta has refused to grant visitation or even provide explanation for the delays. A court hearing regarding the property case was also postponed indefinitely. Concerns over her deteriorating health continue to grow, and senior lawyer U Chi-min criticized the junta's blatant violation of legal norms, emphasizing that the regime has disregarded Myanmar's constitution and undermined fundamental rights. He stressed the urgent need for international action, urging global leaders not to remain silent about this ongoing injustice. In late October, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi's son, Kim Aris, publicly voiced his fears for her well-being, stating that the lack of medical care could endanger her life. He described the charges against her as fraudulent and called for her immediate release along with that of other political prisoners. Kim also appealed for a restoration of democracy in Myanmar, emphasizing the need for international intervention to pressure the junta to end violence and uphold justice. Next, the National Unity Government resolves crisis for 50 stranded migrant workers in Thailand. On November 13th, the Ministry of Labor under the National Unity Government successfully intervened to assist 50 Myanmar migrant workers stranded in Thailand due to mismanagement by a recruitment agency. These workers, consisting of 25 men and 25 women, had initially traveled to Pantham Thani under a government-to-government agreement for construction jobs. Upon arrival, they were informed that no such jobs existed and were instead relocated to Mahachai with the promise of positions in fish processing factories. For over a month, the workers struggled to survive, relying on their own funds to rent accommodations. And after receiving complaints from the workers, the NUG's Ministry of Labor stepped in to mediate. The agency responsible eventually agreed to place the workers in jobs at a fish canning factory in Mahachai within 2 weeks. Additionally, the agency committed to refunding the workers for expenses related to their employment, including pink card fees, and to provide compensation if the promised employment opportunities did not materialize. Next, Union Minister U Aung Myo Min addresses Myanmar communities in Indiana. Union Minister for Human Rights U Aung Myo Min participated in a town hall meeting at the Allen County Public Library in Fort Wayne, Indiana, on November 10th. This event, which included Dr. Mye Wimbird, provided an opportunity for Myanmar nationals in the community to raise pressing questions and concerns. Attendees inquired about the National Unity Government's coordination with ethnic armed groups, the military junta's plans for a sham election, and strategies to address the ongoing violence against civilians. U Aung Myo Min responded openly, providing detailed explanations about the NUG's efforts to unite Myanmar's resistance movements and address the military's human rights violations. Following the town hall, he engaged with community members at a local Burmese monastery to continue these discussions. Next, US and Indonesian presidents unite in condemning the junta's violence against civilians in Myanmar. On November 12th, US President Joe Biden and Indonesian presidents issued a strong condemnation of the Myanmar junta's violence against civilians during their meeting at the White House. The two leaders discussed bilateral relations and global issues, with Myanmar's crisis featuring prominently in their dialogue. In a joint statement, the presidents called for an immediate cessation of violence, urging the junta to return the country to a democratic path. President Biden reaffirmed the United States' support for ASEAN's five-point consensus as a framework for resolving the crisis and commended both ASEAN and the United Nations for their efforts. The leaders further stressed the importance of protecting civilians and ensuring access to humanitarian assistance. Next, NUG introduces a revolutionary VPN to circumvent the junta's internet censorship. The National Unity Government has taken a bold step to counteract the junta's suppression of free communication by introducing a virtual private network, or VPN. This initiative, announced by U Tin Lin Aung, the NUG's Minister of Communications, Information and Technology, aims to bypass the internet restrictions imposed by the military regime. The VPN has been tested successfully with over 1,000 users, including revolutionary groups operating in the northern regions of Myanmar. These groups have reported that the VPN allows for uninterrupted communication and has proven highly effective in bypassing restrictions imposed by all internet service providers. U Tin Lin Aung emphasized that this innovation demonstrates the resilience of technology and its role in supporting Myanmar's revolution. The ministry plans to expand access to the VPN, ensuring both the public and revolutionary forces can benefit from its capabilities. Next, passport extensions for Myanmar citizens in South Korea by the NUG office. For the past 5 months, the NUG representative office in South Korea has been providing passport extensions for Myanmar citizens living in the country. This process involves replacing the junta-issue stamps with NUG-authorized stamps, which are recognized by South Korean immigration authorities. These extensions, valid for 2 years, enable citizens to access essential services such as healthcare, banking, education, and employment. However, the passports extended through the NUG are not yet valid for international travel. Community members in South Korea have highlighted that the fees collected for these extensions contribute directly to the Revolutionary Fund, supporting Myanmar's fight for democracy. Next, freedom of the press under siege. 215 journalists arrested and 11 killed during military rule. According to the Athens organization, nearly 4 years into military rule, 215 journalists have been detained in Myanmar, with 54 still imprisoned and 11 killed. Since February of 2021, the junta has intensified its suppression of media freedom, with additional journalists being placed on wanted lists and subjected to threats and violence. In Shan State, 2 journalists were injured by artillery fire while reporting, and in Mon State, the junta confiscated a journalist's home. The Press Freedom Index for 2024 ranked Myanmar 171 out of 180 countries, marking it as one of the most dangerous places in the world for journalists. Athens has urged international organizations and Myanmar's resistance forces to ensure protections for journalists and uphold press freedom as a cornerstone of federal democracy. And finally, southern Myanmar clashes in October, 94 junta soldiers killed and 17 surrendered. In October, the southern military region reported significant progress in its resistance efforts, with 68 clashes resulting in 94 junta soldiers killed, 108 injured, and 17 surrendering. The Southern Command, in coordination with revolutionary groups, carried out operations that included drone attacks, ambushes, and the capture of enemy outposts. Revolutionary forces seized a large cache of weapons, including 8 heavy firearms and 39 smaller arms. Despite these successes, the junta's attacks on civilian areas caused immense suffering, with 8 civilians killed, 49 injured, and 229 arbitrarily arrested. Revolutionary groups credited their coordinated efforts with local defense teams, ethnic armed organizations, and drone units for the successful outcomes. Myanmar's fight for democracy continues amidst immense adversity. From the efforts of the NUG to assist migrant workers and counter internet censorship, to the bravery of journalists and the sacrifices of revolutionary forces, the resilience of Myanmar's people remains unshaken. As we conclude this week's news, we call on the international community to support Myanmar in its struggle for justice and freedom. Thank you for tuning into MMTV News. We'll see you again next week.